Hi, Dr. Mielitz. This is my knowledge assessment number two, and for my concepts that I've chosen five: two from chapter four, two from chapter five, and one from chapter six. Beginning in chapter four, my first concept that I've chosen is esteem needs, kind of under the umbrella of social needs in the hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Um, they seem to kind of play hand in hand, and esteem needs, in the definition in which they kind of give you in the book, is needs for esteem needs is needs for being respected, having self-respect, and respecting others. And I think in regards to self-esteem, we most often think about how we view ourselves, and how we get the support that we need. And so, in lieu of understanding that, I looked up a psychology article on self-esteem, and it talks about individuals who have low self-esteem will often look for support through indirect behavior. So they will sulk, or they'll whine, or they'll show sadness in order to get this support that they feel like they need. But that those behaviors often will cause kind of a backfire um, onto this person, and they will usually get poor um, results, if you will, when they're seeking that type of attention. So I thought that was really interesting, and that played hand in hand with the way that we interact with our family when we're needing support. If we act a certain way because we need this self-esteem support, oftentimes the way that we act can influence the type of support that we're getting. For my second concept, in chapter four, I chose gender differences, or more specifically, personality differences. And in personality differences, as we know, men and women are very different, but I think in social science now, there's kind of been this shift towards equality, yes, which is very beneficial, but I think in regards to equality, we have in some ways morphed male and female as though there are not many differences, or that there isn't a difference between us. And so I was looking at the differences between male and females in psychology, and I came across another article from Psychology Today that talked about empirical research that goes on in today's society, and how oftentimes they will use criteria for research experiment, but they won't be as thorough as they possibly could have. So this article articulates the different domains in which they are needing to assess personality differences between men and women, and they really go into say that men and women differ, and that women scored much higher than men in sensitivity, warmth, apprehension, and men scored higher in emotional stability, dominance, rule consciousness, and vigilance. And they go and describe all of the ways in which they came up with these different psychology characteristics between men and women, and how they eventually they came up with a valid experiment and valid results. And so in the textbook, it speaks about how women are often attributed with communal traits more common for women than men. They are related to forming and maintaining social relationships with others, and men usually having agentic traits, which are more associated with independence, control, completion of tasks, signaling more of a need for self-reliance and self-motivation. And so, in regards to the type of characteristic traits that this article brought up, it kind of evens out, and they seem to aside with each other. So it's kind of a psychology article backing up what's in the textbook, and that's how I related these two. Moving forward in chapter 5, I chose family values, and in the family values one, to relate it to immediate topic, I chose the song called Ditmas, and so by Mumford and Sons. In the family values, it speaks about how one individual interacts with another individual within the family system, and how that those interactions morph the way that they view each other, how they kind of interact with each other, and honestly how the family interacts, and then eventually it can impact the way that the family interacts with families on the outside or individuals who are not particularly in the family. And so the lyrics to the song Ditmas by Mumford & Sons, you should listen to. It's really good. It says, "And in time, as one reminds the other of the past, a life lived much too fast to hold on to. How am I losing you? A broken house, another dry month waiting for the rain, and I had been resisting this decay. I thought you'd do the same. But this is all I ever was, and this is all you came across those years ago. Now you've gone too far. Don't tell me that I've changed, because that's not the truth, and now I'm losing you. Fragile sound, the world outside just watches as we crawl towards a life of fragile lines and wasted time." So I thought that the interaction between seemingly this male and this female, or one partner and another in this relationship, the way that they interacted and the way that they were thinking of each other was really impacting the way that the relationship was working at this time. And now people on the outside are watching them struggle and trying to seek after maybe solidarity or solace in their relationship, but it seems to be not working out. And so their family value from this perspective would be they care about this relationship, but it's hard and it's not easy to work out, which we all know relationships are tough very often. My second concept in chapter 5 is predispositions. And predispositions, according to a textbook, is defined by the inclinations beforehand to interpret statements in a particular way, dispositions in advance to react in a particular way. And this is probably my favorite one that I came across. I came across this documentary called The American Gospel on Vimeo a couple of months back, and it really heads up the predispositions that Americans in westernized thought have in regards to what we hear when we read the scripture from the Holy Bible. And it talks about how our predispositions in an individualized society really affects the way that we read scripture and the way that we interpret it and the way that we go about living our lives in accordance to the scripture because of the predispositions that we have. And so the American Gospel is on Vimeo, and I think it really relates to how we make these life decisions, or we base parts of our lives off of these predispositions that we have learned from the past, and we use those predispositions to kind of mark the way that we understand things and how we will go about it in the future. And so I think this closely, in a lot of ways, really does relate exactly in the same way to the way that we read Scripture, because for people who read Scripture and who are following Christ or who are Christians, by definition, they are seeking to live their life in a particular way, and the way that we live our lives is in accordance to the Scripture. So whatever we interpret out of the Scripture means so much, according to our predispositions. And the last one is in chapter 6, and the chapter has the concept environmental resources in it. And in this one, it says, I can just read it here, I think it explains it really well. It says, include those environmental resources, include those resources in the physical environment around us that are provided by nature. Families all over the world depend on the earth's resources to live and work. As environmental resources are used, they may be depleted and eventually exhausted. And so for this one, this reminded me how I connected this to media, um, is that in the movie Interstellar, the whole the story of this movie is a man leaving Earth to seek a new world to live in because the Earth is dying. Because we have exhausted its resources and they've become ultimately depleted, and we are not able to live here anymore. And so Matthew McConaughey leaves. He's the guy who plays the main character. He leaves the Earth to find this new place because we are no longer able to rely on the environmental resources of planet Earth because it doesn't exist anymore. And so I thought that closely related in that same way that we would continue to use the resources and deplete them even though we do not really have the availability to do so anymore. So that is my 5 concepts from chapter 4, 5, and 6. Thank you so much. I have the lyrics here on chapter 5 that I'll send and that I'll add to the Dropbox.